Hey everybody, welcome back to DroneTastic. I'm Dan, your host, encouraging you to like, share, and subscribe. Getting right down to it, today is a review of the Losi Mini 8. This little guy. Great little car. I did a speed test video of it. Alright, let's do this. Alright, looks like this bad boy topped out at about 33 miles an hour. It's just a fast little car. You can see I got to about 33 miles an hour for a top speed. She's little. Let's see, it's 14th scale. And take a look under the hood. Take these pins out here. And what you have, pretty much your standard tray setup. You got your receiver, you got a servo for steering with a power switch, you got your ESC right here that can be adjusted to run the nickel metal hydride packs that it came with, or to run on 2S or 3S LiPos. Now I did try some 3S LiPo configuration with this car when I got it. I want to see how fast it would go, and I burned out a motor. Then I geared it properly. According to the manual, which is supposed to be a 12-tooth pinion gear and the stock 58-tooth spur gear. So I ran it on that, the correct configuration for the 3S. Burned the motor out. Third motor in, and it's running. I happen to have a spare here. It's running this little fuse or dynamite. It's a 4500 kV motor. It is pretty high speed, but not much in the way of torque, right? If I'm running the manufacturer's recommended gearing and there's no binding or any problems with anything inside that are causing any additional torque to be placed on the motor, then I shouldn't have a heating issue at all. When I ran this with a 10-tooth pinion gear and the 2S battery, it still got scorching hot. I'm currently running it back at the stock, it's not the stock configuration, but the manufacturer recommended configuration, which is a 14-tooth pinion gear and a 58-tooth spur gear. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this thing outside. I'm going to run it around. It's nighttime, but, you know, it doesn't stop me. It's a car, and we get street lights, which is kind of a nice thing about living in the city. In any case, as soon as I'm done with running through a pack, I'm going to do a temperature test with this Centec infrared thermometer so I can get an accurate temperature reading off the motor, because typically it is too hot to touch. So I'll be right back as soon as we get that straightened out. I'm back. I am back, and I've got this thing here, and I ran it until the motor quit on me. And I'm going to get a temperature reading now off of that Fuse Mini, which is probably ridiculous. So that's 147 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, I'm sorry, 100 and, let's try that like this, 142.7. That's the temperature of this motor. That was the temperature of the motor when it cut out and stopped working. So, that being said, enter the Losi Mini 8 DB. The Losi Mini 8 DB does not get hot. My son and I have a pair of these. We run these out in front of the house, full throttle, just jamming on the gas the whole time. Nothing ever overheats. Nothing ever quits working in the middle. It just runs like it's supposed to. The axle speed on this vehicle is slower than the Mini 8, which again is over here, right? And you can see they're a little bit, the one on the right here, the Mini 8 is a little smaller than the Mini 8 DB. So, here's the plan. This is what I've decided to do with this Mini 8. Because I can run pack after pack after pack and never overheat, which means hours of fun, uninterrupted, no cool down times, no baloney, and none of us are trying to race here. And if we do race together as a family, we want all these vehicles to have similar performance characteristics. We want this to accelerate about the same, want it to top out at about the same speed. And so I'm going to go about showing you the parts that need to be changed out to make this run like this. The first thing to know is you'll need to buy a Fuse 3800 kV motor. That is a $50 motor. But then again, so is this. This motor just does not have the torque to make this happen. If I put them side by side, you can see they line up there. This is a 1/8 inch shaft. This is a 2mm shaft. Be sure to buy the 14 tooth pinion gear for this, and a set of spur gears from them, and you're going to use the 62 tooth gear. I'm going to pull up a chart right now, and that chart will show how I came up with those calculations, and then when you come back, we'll start tearing this apart. Okay, so as we look at the chart here in column B, that is the manufacturer's configuration for the Mini 8DB. It comes with a 60-tooth spur gear, a 14-tooth pinion gear for a motor drive ratio of 4.29. That is achieved by dividing the spur gear tooth count by the pinion tooth count. And you get your motor drive ratio by multiplied by your differential, gives you your final drive ratio of 11.14 to 1. Some of those other things are standards. 8.4 volts for the pack provides your full throttle motor RPM, and that's calculated by multiplying the kV by the voltage to get the full throttle. And then the axle RPM is going to be, of course, your full throttle motor RPM divided by the final drive ratio. And what I found was that by putting the 3800 in the Mini 8, I could use a 62-tooth spur gear and 14-tooth pinion gear, and with the differential as a constant, which I cannot change in that system, I end up with very minute differences between the motor drive ratio and the final drive ratio and the axle RPM. I'm only about 50 some, maybe 60 RPM faster on the axle with the Mini 8 running the 3800 motor than the Mini 8DB. So if all the physics work out, this will be comparable to, they will be comparable to one another, which is what the goal is. Okay, so the first thing we have to pay attention to here is the fact that that's the 4500 in there, and this is the 3800 here. She's going to sit right about there, and she's going to stick out. Well, let's just be fair about this. She's going to stick out about that much farther, and if I check my grid here, which is a 1/2 inch per line, it looks like, let's try it from here so you can see as well from home. It looks like we're looking at just over a 1/4 inch bigger than the motor, so than the original motor. So what we're looking at here then is a receiver that's really wide, and it butts up to the back of the motor. So if you're lucky enough to have had one of these long enough, the first thing you'll do is you'll remove this from the sticky tape on the bottom. Mine's already pulled loose. And we're going to turn that on its side. Now we'll obviously have to do something with these wires, loosen them up a little bit, but the wires on their side will allow for, or the receiver on its side will allow for plenty of room to mount the bigger motor in place. So I'm going to get started doing that. The first thing we're going to do is remove these 4 screws, and underneath there's these 2 and these 2 that hold the housing for the pinion and spur gear together. So it turns out that these two are the screws you need to get out. I think the whole thing pulls up after that. And that's that. So now the gearing is exposed, at least the pinion gear is exposed. Now we need to get to the spur gear. Let's disconnect the connectors for the old motor, just to get them out of the way and make it easier to work. All right, now that all the screws of this plate have been removed, you can lift it and rotate it right out of the way. And now we have access to the spur gear and the pinion. All right, next thing to do is to lift and remove this center brace that is giving me a little trouble here, but it does come out. There's the piece that covers up the axle for the spur gear. All right, so let's take this motor out. Okay, now that we have the rear differential opened up, we come in here and we can lift this whole assembly out of the way. Come off the end like that, because the set screw is, well, it looks like the set screw is missing on this one, so we'll have to figure something out for that. But now I can change out the spur gear from the 58 tooth to the 62 tooth. Okay, so first that comes off, and then you start unscrewing it. Compression washers. Oh, and there's a pin, and that pin slides out when you push it towards the end. Let's pull that out, and off comes the 58 tooth spur gear. Okay, Now, let's pull out a 62 tooth. Now, there are 3 sizes in here, 58, 60, and 62. Now, in really teeny tiny writing at the very top of this thing, it says 62. And that's the one we're going to put in. Inside the old one are these slip discs that we're going to pop out. And we're going to put them in the new spur gear. There's 2. And then it appears as if there is a bearing that needs to come out. So I'm just going to give that a little nudge here. Oh yeah, she just wants to pop right out of there. Just need a little bit extra. Put the slipper discs in there. And on this side. And we shove the bearing in, press it in till it's even, and it's even or flush with the inner ledge. And now we reassemble it. That goes on. This goes over that. Oh, we gotta get the pin in. Don't forget the pin. I find this pretty easy to work with this way, but she is in the hole, and now she's set. Nice. And that pin rests inside the groove on that piece there, the plate. Now we put this combination of lock washer and washers in, or over this, and now we put the screw or the nut on it. We tighten it up so that it's nice and tight, because we don't want this slipping and spinning around. We need this to be tight so that it'll actually put power to the wheels. Okay. So that's on. Next thing to put back on is this piece here. But I've had problems with it in the past, so for the first time I'm gonna pull it all the way out and give it a little touch of Loctite to hold it together. Ooh, that's it. That's all we need, just a touch. Set it in there. I was surprised to find no Loctite whatsoever on this kit when we got it. All right, you want your flat to line up with your set screw. Okay, and now we'll just tighten this screw down. Okay, and that's that. So that's on. Now we'll put the differential gear back on, which was a screw on the end. I'm going to shorten this a bit. I should probably Loctite that too, but there we go. These little field screwdrivers are fun. I like the way they extend and all that, but all right, and there we are. And there is the replaced pinion. That's the 62 tooth pinion on the, I'm sorry, spur gear. And now we're gonna put it back in the buggy. Okay, there's that piece, but now I also have to set the axle. Forgot to set the drive axle. So let's pull this up and out again so I can get the axle in. Now it's in and down and around and into position. All right, there we are. There's the 62. Now the next thing to do is put the differential cover back on and put these sway bars, or these, I'm not sure what these upper control arms, I guess that's what they're called, are for. But that, yeah, I mean, I know what they're for, but keeps the tire from leaning over like it is now. All right, so let's put this on. And we'll be right back. we got the rear end reassembled. Next, we have to take the motor mount off of this motor, and that means we have to take the pinion gear off as well. So we're gonna do that next. Now in this case I got lucky. This was a replacement that I bought from the hobby store, and it came with an 1/8 inch shaft on it. But like I said, here's another brand new one, and it's a 2mm, and it's the same motor, it's just a different shaft. On this motor, you're going to use the bigger holes. There are 2 smaller ones that are offset a little bit, and there are 2 big ones, and that's what you're going to screw this into. Okay, that's what she should look like. Now we're going to put the spur gear on. There's a 14 tooth, just like what was on the other. All right, once again, that screw on the pinion gear goes on the flat part of the motor there. Now, at this point, we don't tighten this down yet too much. I mean, I'll just set it so that it sits. All right, and now she'll hang there just fine. And we'll address this in a minute. Okay, next thing to do is to insert that brace back where it was. Make sure it sits flat. So I had to rotate it 180 degrees for that to happen. Okay, next piece is to put this in place. And that's going to take those when it's done. So I don't have to put those in yet. I just need to put these 2 and these 4 up front in. And while I'm setting these screws, I'm going to take advantage of some of the Loctite that spilled all over the table. Because the fact is that this plastic frame doesn't take kindly to torque very much. So if I can just get the screw in and seat it, that's it, or else you end up stripping them out. I know, because I've had to replace a couple parts due to stripping. Make sure that looks good. Yep, servo saver's good. Okay, let's make sure this is going to fit. So first pull the receiver out of the way. Just kind of try to get that motor seated there. Okay, and that looks pretty good. And there's plenty of space, and I'm just gonna put this thing this way, then it sits low. And here's all the motor wires, and they're color coded, so they're gonna be fine. So the next thing I gotta do, and I lucked out, I lined up that pinion gear right up. It's perfect. It is perfectly lined up with the other gear when I set the screw on it. So I'm gonna roll it around, and I'm gonna hit that set screw on it one more time, just to tighten it up. Nothing worse than a loose set screw. All right, and like I said, we got Loctite on there, so that should be fine. All right, now, to properly set your pinion gears, you need a piece of paper. I just so happen to have a piece of paper like that right here, so I need to cut that kind of small. Doesn't need to be huge, but you got to be able to get at it. According to the instructions, you set, and this is how I've done it the last few times, but in order to set this properly, first we get our screws ready. I think what we'll do, we get these tightened down, sort of, just finger tight, not out of control, but just enough so that we're screwing this down into place where it belongs. All right, the next thing we do is we screw in this motor mount with the motor attached. We'll come back and hit this hard after we've got the paper in place. So ideally, there should be a piece of paper between the two gears. I can already tell it's pretty close to right on, but to be 100% certain, you just kind of feed this piece of paper into the gears. Okay, and then it's in, and it's preventing you from over tightening that position there. And then with the correct sized nut driver, you come in and you're going to tighten this motor up in its position. Okay, there's one. And there's two. Okay, now we just roll it up, back it out. And we just make sure there's a little bit of play in the gears. Now you're not going to be able to see this, but I do. Yeah, perfect. Looks perfect. Okay, she's good. So now I have new gearing and a new motor inside of this. Now I'm going to button everything up, and we're going to take it outside and we're going to burn up a whole battery on it. And when I get back, we'll do a temperature test. All right, and the last thing I'm going to do is, because I want to secure this in place, I'm going to take some hot glue, just squirt a little bit on the side of it. So when I put it back down in here, should hold it in place, and I shouldn't have any issues. Yeah, she's good now. Okay, now I gotta plug the motors in, the motor wires in. I like the fact that they're color coded on this vehicle. I hope that it's accurate when I get out there for a forward motion, but we'll find out. It didn't look like the hot glue took either, but it's fine. It should be absolutely fine. I do like these 2S's. They fit almost perfectly in there without too much trouble. So yes, it's covered in grass. I was running it in some rough terrain to try and get this new motor to heat up. So I'm going to take these pins out now. We're going to take a look at the temperature of that 3800 kV motor, which is now installed. And this motor, trying to get the highest, topped out at 113 degrees. I know the other one gets hotter than this, but this is great now. This will never get above that temperature. The 4500 kV motor was scorching hot after a full run on the battery, and today she just flipped out. This one held up like a champ. This longer motor has more torque. It's a lower RPM motor. And again, based on the chart that I showed you earlier, the final drive axle ratio is the same as the Mini 8DB, which again, is our favorite in the house. So it's a little heavier, so this does accelerate quite a bit faster than this one does. I'm not sure the actual weight difference, but I mean, it just seems this was pretty fast. Although it's dark and it's raining, again, I had a hard time with that. I'm going to post a new video coming up pretty soon here where I'm just going to pit one of these against one of these. But at this point, I'm absolutely satisfied with the way this is going. I mean, you know, I can touch that all day long and there's no discomfort, no problem. This is what this car was supposed to be. And I think that's what Horizon and Losi recognized when, you know, because at the hobby shop, I told the guy what my plan was for the vehicle, and he said, that sounds like a fantastic idea. So this is what I've done. And now she performs like the Mini 8DB. She's a little slower. She's easier for the kids to handle. And now as a family, we can all race 4 vehicles that are all geared the same and all have the same final axle RPM. So with that said, I'd like to thank you for tuning in. Remind you once again to subscribe, share, and like if you like. And, you know, take care.